20th September 2012, Baudaloka Mavata, Colombo. A picture of serenity. Priests in saffron robes and lay people clad in white gather outside the All Ceylon Buddhist Congress to give peace and reconciliation a chance. By marking their displeasure over the visit of the UN team who are here in the country to assess Sri Lanka's progress in achieving peace and reconciliation. Sri Lanka has appeared on the UN radar, particularly over the manner in which the war was ended, and due to issues such as displacement, disappearances, and the culture of impunity which have been highlighted by sections within the country and the international community. The Jathika Hela Urume, however, feel that Sri Lanka has been unfairly criticised by the UN, which they believe is adopting double standards. Around 300 protesters have gathered to mark their objection to the visit and scrutiny by the UN team.
එක්සත් ජාතීන්ගේ සංවිධානයේ මානව හිමිකම් පිළිබඳ කොමසාරිස්තුමිය වන නවනිදම් පිල්ලේ මැතිනියගේ නියෝජිතයින් 3 දෙනෙක් පසුගිය 14 වෙනිදා ශ්‍රී ලංකාවට පැමිණියා. එම නියෝජිතයින් 3 දෙනාගේ පැමිණීමේ අරමුණ උනේ විශේෂයෙන්ම පසුගිය මාර්තු මාසයේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාවට විරුද්ධව එක්සත් ජාතීන්ගේ සංවිධානය තුල සම්මත වුණු යෝජනාව විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ නියෝජිත පිරිසේ ප්‍රධානියා වන හැනි මෙගාලි ඔහු අවුරුදු 33ක් යුදාපරාධ පිළිබඳ පරීක්ෂණ පවත්වපු විශේෂඥයෙක්. ඔහු අද ශ්‍රී ලංකාවට පැමිණලා තියෙනවා. ඔහුගේ ප්‍රධාන අරමුණ වෙලා තියෙන්නේ විශේෂයෙන්ම යුද්ධයේ අවසාන අධීරයේ සිදු වුණාය කියන යුදාපරාධ පිළිබඳ සොයා බලන්න.
The JHU are among others who feel that this is interference into the sovereign affairs of Sri Lanka and it is unacceptable, especially as they feel that Sri Lanka has its own mechanism to deal with the issue of alleged war crime.
අපේ ඉල්ලා සිටින්නේ මේ රටේ යුද අපරාධයක් සිදුව තිබේ නම් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ ඒ සඳහා සොයා බලන්නට අවශ්‍ය වාතාවරණයක් තියෙනවා අධිකරණ පද්ධතියක් තියෙනවා එයින් අදාළ දඬුවම් වැරදිකරුවන්ට මීට පෙරත් ලබා දීලා තියෙනවා යම් යම් වැරදි කරපු හමුදාවේ පොලිසිය නියෝජිතයන්ට.
The protesters head towards the UN headquarters in Colombo to hand over a letter addressed to Navi Pillay, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, to make known their sentiments on the visit by the UN team.
We are emphasizing the fact that defeating terrorism is a right of a sovereign nation and it is the duty of the security forces. And accusing our security forces with charges which with mass murders of civilians is not acceptable because the security forces were conducting their duty.
The JHU feel that the visit by the UN team could bring more harm than good to the country. However, others see the visit of the UN team and the UN Universal Periodic Review as an opportunity for Sri Lanka to demonstrate to the world its commitment to achieve lasting peace and reconciliation. Dr. Saravana Muttu of the Centre for Policy Alternatives talks to us more about the visit by the UN team.
Upcoming UPR session. Visit by the technical team had it was directly to do with the US sponsored resolution. Because
no, it doesn't. It's not direct to do with the US sponsored resolution per se. It has to do with UPR. It has to do with the invitation extended to the High Commissioner, and it does have a knock-on effect, I think, with regard to the US-sponsored resolution on Sri Lanka, and not just the US alone, there were 40-odd other co-sponsors. So it has to do with Sri Lanka's relationship, broadly speaking, with the UN Human Rights Council.
Okay, so on the visit per se, there's not much sort of information coming out of, we are not so much aware as to what the outcome was or what was discussed.
I think there's no big secret with regard to it. Whilst they may not have had a press conference or anything like that, it was very clear they were coming to meet with representatives of the government of Sri Lanka, representatives of civil society, and they probably also met with the diplomatic community here in Sri Lanka as well. So they had meetings in Colombo, they had meetings in the north and east as well.
In relation to this team, is it more sort of like a fact-finding mission, or could we see it as one which merely plays the role of observer and then reporter?
I think it's fact-finding. I mean, observation, yes, but it's also fact-finding. They want to know what the ground situation is. They want to know the perspectives and the opinions of the various stakeholders in Sri Lanka. So it's a combination of both. But I suppose it is very much, if it's a technical mission, it is very much fact-finding in terms of what's happening on the ground. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? What has succeeded? What has not?
In the resolution that was passed on Sri Lanka, one of the main elements was they'd urged the government to have a credible sort of investigation, both war crimes committed by both the LTT and the Sri Lankan forces. So now the national action plan that has been put forward by the government following the LLRC also has a subsection that deals with accountability. Do you think that this would address sufficiently what they've sort of put forward? Do you think that?
Now, there are two things here. One is that there is a National Human Rights Action Plan, which the government will be talking about, I suspect, at the UPR in November, the first week of November 2012, this year. Secondly, there is an action plan with regard to the implementation of the recommendations of the LLRC. Now, the UPR doesn't specifically talk about what is in LLRC. That's a different process. This is 4 years after the first UPR that we had. The LLRC action plan does talk about accountability to the extent that it sets a timeline of 5 years. The issue with accountability and the LLRC is not so much with the implementation plan. Rather, it is with the LLRC report in itself. I personally took the view that the LLRC, with regard to accountability, almost completely endorsed the government's position that there wasn't really an issue of accountability. Nevertheless, the LLRC did say, with regard to the Trinco 5, the 5 students who were murdered, the 17 ACF workers, the Channel 4 documentary, and with regard to any other incidents where, by accident, civilians may have been killed by the armed forces of Sri Lanka, that there should be investigation. So the problem with accountability and the LLRC, as the Geneva Resolution noted, the LLRC report in itself falls short in respect of accountability. And the Geneva Resolution explicitly asked the government to come up with plans with regard to accountability.
If they don't see the state as sort of dealing with this credibly, do you think, like one of the protests that was held by the JHU, one of the sort of concerns that they brought up, that this was just something that would open up for an international investigation into war crimes? Do you think that it could possibly lead to one, if the state does not credibly sort of investigate this?
You can't rule it out, but at the same time, you certainly can't say it's imminent. This depends a lot on what the government is willing and able to do, the extent to which it convinces the international community that it is willing and able to do this, the extent to which international politics keep Sri Lanka in focus, and that there is sufficient pressure that endures to ensure that accountability is achieved, fulfilled in the Sri Lankan context. So there are any number of factors that affect this. I certainly will say this: I don't think that this whole issue of accountability and tribunals and all that is probable or imminent or anything like that. But I don't see it also disappearing from the agenda.
Now moving on to the UPR, the session that's coming up. Sri Lanka, the government has submitted its own national report. In terms of the recommendations that were made in the session held in 2008, they had accepted around 60 of them. So how do you see sort of any progress in terms of some of the recommendations that were made, in terms of implementing those recommendations?
Well, I mean, there are a whole lot of recommendations that the other countries put forward in the course of the UPR, which Sri Lanka government agreed to. But also what's interesting is there are voluntary commitments that were made by the government of Sri Lanka in 2008. Amongst those voluntary commitments in 2008 was to establish the Constitutional Council in respect of the 17th Amendment. Another was to fully implement the 13th Amendment. Now, we know that the 17th Amendment has been gutted, abolished, and thrown away, replaced by the 18th, and the 13th Amendment has yet to be fully implemented anywhere in the country. So the general thrust and tenor of those developments has been such that one can't really say that the human rights protection situation in Sri Lanka has vastly improved, because even the voluntary commitments have not really been fulfilled. One has to look at those substantive commitments. We still have issues with regard to militarization, which of course was an issue that could not have been seen in 2008 because the war was not yet over. But we still have disappearances. We still have questions with regard to disappearances. We still have a serious problem with regard to the culture of impunity. And since the war ended, the media itself has been full of reportage of horrendous lapses with regard to the rule of law.
Okay.
So I don't think the situation has really improved.
But say in terms of those 4 years, some of the developments that they have pointed out in terms of, say, the reduction of security forces from the northern peninsula, and the fact that with the closing of Manik Farm now there are no IDP camps.
Well, let's take those two examples that you bring up. With regard to the reduction of security forces in the north, the government says now that there are only 15,000. I think is the figure. 15,000.
Yeah, 15,000 from 15.
The Hindu, the other day, published an article which says that 16 out of 19 divisions of the Sri Lankan army are deployed in the north and east of this country. Okay? By a conservative estimation, that's about 80 to 86,000. That's not including Army, Navy, SDF. If that is the case, that it's only 15,000, can we be told where the rest have been sent? What are they building huge camps for in the north? For whom? We know that there's $100 million US from the Chinese to build cantonments in the north. For 15,000 people? Or is it more? Where have they gone? And the issue with regard to militarization is not the mere numbers alone. It is what role, even if it is 5,000, what role do they actually play? Yesterday, they closed down the Chetikulam camp. And now we say Manik Farm is closed. All right. What has happened to these people? How many of them have actually gone back to their homes? How many of them are living with families, host families, relatives, and friends? How many of them who were moved yesterday have actually gone to even host families and to their homes? And how many are being housed in temporary shelters? Those are where the answers really lie. You see, you can have a statement like that, but the real issue here is in terms of actually monitoring that and finding out what the real truth is. The headline story is militarization decreased or military presence decreased. Manik Farm closed. Militarization decreased. Where have they gone? What is the role that the military continues to play in the north and east? With regard to the IDPs, how many have really gone home? How many are still, in effect, IDPs? That's the question.
So, as one last question, sir, the NGO and the civil society community have quite a big role to play in terms of monitoring the progress of the implementations of the recommendations that were made and the recommendations that were actually agreed to. So, in terms of that, some of the things that maybe are, the primary sort of concerns that you would be raising would be with regard to the ones that were voluntarily committed?
No, with all. Those that were voluntarily committed to by the government of Sri Lanka, those that were made by other countries which the government of Sri Lanka accepted. And therefore, over the 4-year period, what has happened in respect of those two cases and to human rights protection in general in the country. That's what we're looking at, because every single country in the UN goes through this process at the Council every 4 years, And the point with regard to human rights is, of course, is that, people can make rhetorical commitments. But the real test at the end of the day is the demonstrable action that has taken place on the ground. Some time ago, I was at a meeting at which someone from Jaffna was asked the question, how are things there? And this person turned around and said, they may look better, but they feel worse. Now that's exactly what 4 years, monitoring, UPR, National Human Rights Action Plan, that's exactly what this is all about.